Hi, my name is Dr. Gary Graham, and I want to thank you for joining us again for the third video of this educational series. When discussing the different forms of any therapy, including laser therapy, we first have to define doses of therapy. There are two basic or generalized dose classifications of any therapy. First, we have a pharmacological dose of therapy that, for the sake of this discussion, we will call first aid healthcare, and many times referred to as allopathic care. Then we have a physiological dose of therapy, which for the sake of this discussion we will call natural health care, and many times referred to as alternative health care. By definition, both of these doses of health care will change the function of disease or injured tissue, because if it would not change abnormal tissue, then it wouldn't be a therapy in the first place. Remember that the names of these doses of care are not important. You can call them anything you want, but the definitions, or should I say the differences between these two doses, are very important. Those differences are: first aid healthcare will have the same effect on normal tissue as it does on abnormal tissue, where natural healthcare only affects the abnormal tissue and has no effect on normal tissue. This means that all doses of first aid care, when given at a sufficient dose to change abnormal tissue, will also change normal tissue to the same degree. And changing normal tissue is another way of saying side effects or a toxic dose of care. Where natural health care is what you may call a little more of an intelligent form of health care, because it's able to differentiate between normal and abnormal tissue and only affects the abnormal tissue. And since there is no effect on normal tissue, there is virtually no side effects or toxic dose with this form or dose of therapy. So how do you decide which dose of care your patient needs? Simply put, a patient needs a first aid dose of healthcare when they can no longer maintain life or require external assistance to heal an injury properly in their current state. And they require natural health care when they can no longer maintain health in their current state. And we have to remember that life and health are two entirely different conditions as it pertains to health care, as there are many healthy people that will not survive an injury without first aid intervention. Then there are many people that are alive and stable, but in very poor health. The problem is that virtually all forms of first aid care to save your life also compromises a percentage of your health. So one of the most important decisions you make as a doctor is when each dose of therapy is required, and even more importantly, for how long. Another way of explaining the difference is this. A first aid dose of care is more focused on treating what is there that shouldn't be, where a natural dose of care is more focused on providing what is missing that should be there, then letting the patient's body heal itself. But please don't misunderstand me. Both first aid and natural doses of health care are necessary, and it should never be a choice of just one or the other. Most significant health issues will require both doses of care at some point in their treatment program. Now let's relate the same principles to forms of laser therapy. For the sake of time, we will only discuss the two most common forms of laser therapy in this video: infrared and true low-level laser. We will start with the infrared laser therapy. The first thing usually stated when determining the therapeutic quality of a laser is the joules of energy that it can produce. This mistake is usually based out of ignorance of the subject matter, so we should discuss this for a moment. Joules of energy is defined as the International System Unit of Electrical, Mechanical, and Thermal Energy. And by definition, heat travels through space in the form of infrared radiation. When you stand in front of a heater or a fire, it's the infrared wavelengths of radiation that warms you. There is no doubt that infrared laser therapy is a thermal or heat therapy. Some manufacturers of infrared lasers claim that their therapy is non-thermal, but that is because they use an infrared wavelength that is not well absorbed in the surface skin tissue, but better absorbed in the deeper tissues. Therefore, there is less sensation of heat. But regardless of where the energy is absorbed, it still delivers heat, and that's the primary therapeutic action of infrared laser therapy. even though the sales personnel will usually call their infrared laser a low-level laser or a cold laser and deny that the laser is a thermal or a heat laser, they either prove their ignorance or count on the consumer's ignorance by immediately contradicting themselves by saying it's all about the joules of energy their laser delivers, which is just another language of saying how much heat their laser delivers. Therefore, joules of energy, a thermal measurement, is very critical and important in all forms of infrared laser therapy because that determines the proper therapeutic dose. And since infrared laser radiation will heat normal tissue just as fast as abnormal tissue, it is definitely a first aid or a pharmacological dose of therapy. When you calculate the therapeutic dose, also called the irradiation dose of infrared radiation for any treatment, it is measured in joules of energy, which is only important to infrared laser therapy. Joules of energy is composed of three important factors, and you must consider all three factors when speaking about joules of energy. First is the power density, which is the milliwatts of power or the amount of energy the laser delivers. Next is the exposure time, which is how long you treat any given area. And finally, the size of the area being irradiated or the square centimeters of tissue being treated. These three factors are used every day in normal life. For example, if you're going to bake a turkey, you set the temperature, which is the same as the power density, and the timer, which is the exposure time, which is based on the size of your turkey, which is the area being irradiated. This gives you the proper dose and delivery of heat to achieve the desired result. These three factors together is defined as the joules of energy per square centimeter, commonly referred to as or written as JCM squared, and indicates the amount of heat that is delivered to the targeted area of therapy. When utilized properly, it is actually the toxic thermal effects of infrared laser therapy that kills pain by inhibiting the sensory nerve functions, and the same dose also stimulates a reaction to heal the tissue. Again, don't get me wrong, this therapy has a very valid function, as this is much safer as long as it's used properly than any pain-killing narcotic and much more reliable. However, it is not the only method of pain management and does not really provide a healing response to the body, but only creates a pain-killing and healing reaction, which is quite different. Next, we have low-level laser therapy. Even though everybody calls their form of laser therapy low-level these days, the definition of low-level laser is very precise, and very few meet those definitions. We will cover those and other details in future videos. Low-level laser therapy utilizes a precise 630 to 635 nanometer wavelengths of coherent electromagnetic energy, which is a visible bright red wavelength of light. The most common function of visible wavelengths of energy is the activation of the chromophores in our eyes for vision. A chromophore is defined as a pigmented substance that accepts photons in living tissue, or simply just a biological light receptor. The common biological action of low-level laser therapy is photobiomodulation through photon energy transfer to biological chromophores found throughout the body. More simply put, when a photon, which is defined as a single ray of light or a ray of electromagnetic energy, which is also called a quantum, within a specific wavelength spectrum and having the correct power density or milliwatts of power, strikes a matching chromophore, the energy of the photon is transferred to the chromophore, and the photon, being pure energy, ceases to exist at that point. When and if the chromophore accepts a photon, it causes a biochemical change within the cell or tissue. This biochemical change will either activate or inhibit the cell's functions. The one word that's most important here is the word accepts. The photon has to be accepted by the chromophore, And if the matching chromophore is not there, or does not need the energy of that photon, which is the case with normal tissue, then the photon is simply ignored and has no biological effect on that normal tissue, which means the biological chromophores found in all living tissues only accept matching photons that are needed to activate or inhibit abnormally functioning cells. Therefore, since these photons have no effect on normal tissue, true low-level laser therapy has virtually no toxic doses and is a true physiological or natural dose of healthcare. And since low-level laser therapy utilizes a power density of less than 5 milliwatts per diode, there is no potential for heating the tissue, and therefore the joules of energy have absolutely no bearing on the radiation dose of low-level laser therapy in any way, which makes it one of the safest forms of therapy ever developed. True low-level laser therapy is not a mechanical, chemical, or thermal stimulus to the body, but a true, let's call it, an energy food for the body. So even though both forms of laser therapy are highly effective, they approach healthcare from not only different directions and philosophy, but a totally different dose of therapy as well. Many doctors are only comfortable utilizing one or the other, but I believe that most informed doctors understand the difference and choose to utilize both forms of therapy as and when they are needed. Either way, it's up to each doctor's own personal choice and preference. Finally, we at Laser Pulsar System have chosen to specialize in natural energy medicine based around true low-level laser therapy. The reason for this is twofold. First, the world doesn't need another infrared therapy laser, as there are many quality products to choose from already. Second, and most important, is our philosophy of healthcare. We prefer the use of a physiological dose of care whenever possible, and there are very few quality low-level laser therapy devices and even fewer quality natural energy medicine devices on the market today. Our goal is to fill this void and offer doctors a balanced choice in quality energy medicine. In our next video, we will cover more general effects of low-level laser therapy. I want to thank you again for your time. As always, for further questions or information about laser pulsar therapy products, please contact me, Dr. Gary Graham, or anyone at these contacts. Thank you again, and we hope that you will join us again for our next video in this educational series.